Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Naruto Uzumaki breathed in the cold night air as he stood on the second floor balcony of the Hokage mansion, looking up at the night sky. He turned around as he heard the door open. Naruto, come back to bed. Anko and Tsunade are getting chilly without you. Ha ha, okay, Hinata-chan, I'll be right there, you go on ahead. As Hinata Hyuga went back into the apartment, Naruto took one last look at the night sky and saw 3 brilliant L.Y. bright stars, reminding him of the three precious loves in his life, and the events that led to them finding each other. Another day, another dent. Naruto mumbled as he walked through one of the many small woods within the gates of Konohagakure. The foliage was light and controlled, unlike the dense woods just outside the city's gates. With the exception of a few cleared paths for traders, there was an almost impenetrable forest surrounding the city. Impenetrable for non-ninjas, anyway. That was the domain of the Anbu, but Naruto preferred finding solitude after a hard day's training amid the nature within the city, which many of the village residents often took for granted. He had returned from a training pilgrimage with Jiraiya a day ago, the perverted hermit Sanin having taught him all he knew. It was supposed to have taken 3 years, but with the aid of the demon inside him, and an endless love of learning new techniques, in a mere 12 months he had absorbed all the wisdom and power that the perverted ninja master had to offer. For some reason Jiraiya wanted to keep going, but without anything left to teach, Naruto had began to long for his native soil. Gone was the effervescent confidence and bubbly bravado he held a year ago, replaced by guarded optimism, carefully planned action. He was not a sourpuss pessimist, by any means. After all, Naruto was still Naruto, orange outfit and all. But still, a year of training in near solitude had taught him the value of silence and restraint. His return had been triumphant, at least in his eyes, but the day had been less than stellar. While Jiraiya visited the Hokage, both to deliver his report and make yet another doomed attempt at flirting, Naruto busied himself with visiting all his old friends, but one meeting had been less than plea-san. Sakura Haruno. Currently growing into a fine medic nin, Sakura studied under the Hokage herself. But despite her promising ability, there were several issues which made Sakura a less than promising protege. When Sasuke abandoned Konoha, he had abandoned her as well, and Sakura had dealt with his leaving in a regressive way. Ultimately, she was more comfortable hanging on to what she was familiar with, what was comfortable for her. Her adoration of Sasuke as a kind of golden Adonis never wavered, even when most of his fan club, including Ino, had moved on. Furthermore, her coldness towards Naruto seemed to magnify, always giving him grief for even daring the most modest of friendly gestures. It was probably at Tsunade's insistence that Sakura stomached the presence of the man who lost Sasuke-kun. I don't know what she's had to deal with, so I won't judge her, but damn, she didn't have to hit me quite so hard. Oh, well, add another to the long list of people who hate me. Naruto sighed. Between her and the villagers, many of whom were extremely upset that his leave had not been permanent, Naruto had his work cut out for him. And he knew it. To be fair, he mused, not everything was going to hell, as he thought back to the other events of the day. Something that was positive in his eyes was the meeting of someone who he hadn't considered a friend up until now. Around noontime, while eating at Ichiraku's ramen, Naruto was approached by Mitarashi Anko, the special Junin who had served as examiner during Naruto's Chunin exam. Apparently her favorite dango shop was about next door to Ichiraku. She was beautiful, that was for sure, and she carried herself with a sensuality and aggressiveness that scared most people, but Naruto found intriguing. Their rapport was odd, to say the least, a unique mixture of bragging, flirtation and thinly veiled threats of violence somehow combining into a friendly conversation, all spoken between mouthfuls of dango and ramen. During this bizarre verbal dance, she did begrudgingly admitted that his victory over Neji Hyuga in the finals had been pretty cool, and then made an innuendo about how he could put his amazing stamina to better use. That had sparked a kind of contest between the two, to see who could make the other more embarrassed by their conversation. After about 5 minutes, Naruto was nearly choking on his miso ramen with every word that came out of Anko's mouth. She was simply too good at teasing. By using her wiles to fluster him, she was winning their little verbal contest, but Naruto quickly thought of a way to duck out without technically losing, and get the last laugh. I'll have to take you up on those offers sometime, Anko-chan, I have to get going. Anko grinned wide in victory at this. Oh, and thanks for covering the bill. Naruto quickly muttered under his breath. Half a second later, Naruto was halfway down the city block, leaving behind a momentarily confused and soon-to-be broke Anko. Ah, the Dine and Dash, a classic, Naruto reflected. Yet another technique taught to him by Jiraiya. Arg, I'll get you for that, Uzumaki. Anko's voice echoed in the background as Naruto dashed towards a crowded open marketplace. Strangely, her tone had carried not only anger, but also a hint of playfulness, as if she knew she had lost the battle, but was swearing to win the war. Keeping up a decent clip in case the special Junin decided to chase after him. Naruto accidentally rammed right into someone. Ow. Damn it. Gomen Nasai, are you alright? Don't apologize. I was the one who was running full bore. Quote. Na Naruto-kun. Rubbing his head and looking up, he saw who he had bumped into. Hinata-chan. Fancy meeting you here. Normally almost always wearing a small pout ever since Naruto had left, Hinata broke out into one of the widest grins Naruto had ever seen. That was of course, for about 3 seconds, before Hinata fainted dead away, a small nosebleed apparent. Despite any progress she had made in the last year, she was still a little fragile, apparently. Once she had recovered, they had walked all over the city, merely talking of days past and dreams the future. She seemed deeply upset when evening came and they had to part ways for home. From what everyone would tell him later, Hinata had been downright depressed during his absence, but had blossomed with his return. It warmed him to think his friendship meant a lot to someone. Hinata was dark and shy, Naruto reflected, but once you got to know her, she was very good friend. Now walking through downtown, Naruto absent-mindedly kicked a can lying in the street and muttered, so everything's not a total bust. He reaffirmed to himself. The rest of the Genin 9 were happy to see him, as well. A year hadn't been enough time to turn his world upside down. With the exception of Ino, who was taking her training more seriously now, everyone else seemed much the same. Naruto took one last look at the evening sky, admiring its reds and oranges, before turning and heading for home. What he did not notice was several sneering figures hanging outside a nearby bar, and how they began to follow him once he was further down the road. Tsunade drummed her fingers against her desk as her old comrade made his report. Jiraiya had come back far too fast. His purpose for taking Naruto out of Konohakage was twofold, both to strengthen Naruto and stall the Akatsuki. They could not take him if they could not find him. But they had not counted on Naruto mastering Jiraiya's lessons so quickly. It had made sense, Tsunade considered, that a young man able to learn the Rasengan within a week could fully grasp Jiraiya's other techniques in a year. It was a costly miscalculation. Naruto was back in Konoha, hardly a safe haven, as Kisame and Itachi's little incursion a year ago had made clear. But whisking him away again would not work, either. Tsunade truly believed that Naruto would become the Rokudaime. But in order to do so he would have to sway the hearts and minds of the villagers, starting with his peers, and he could do no such thing hundreds of miles away. He was destined to be a leader, not a hermit. It can't be helped, Jiraiya. He's here to stay. The best we can do is try to protect him inside the village until he is strong enough to fight the Akatsuki. You mean assigning Anbu to be bodyguards? Quote. No. Many of the Anbu hail from clans which lost much family 13 years ago to the Kyuubi. At best they would be lax in their guardianship, at worst they might plot to harm him, and I will not tolerate that. Quote. Then what's the plan? We will have to assign someone to be a personal mentor, probably a Junin. Someone to continue fostering his abilities, while simultaneously protecting him. Any candidates? Quote, none so far, unfortunately. Well, don't worry about it. The Akatsuki won't be here overnight. We still have some time to formulate plans. What say you and I go out for some sake to celebrate my return? Quote, Tsunade snorted at the toad hermit's self-importance. Never in a million years, you perverted bastard. I swore an oath that no matter what life held for me, I would never go out with you. Not even insulted, the hermit shrugged. Just as well, I suppose. I've been longing to get back to the bathhouses, anyway. Jiraiya was forced to quickly vacate the room as Tsunade began hurling objects. Soon once again by herself, Tsunade fumed. Jiraiya may have been a great ninja, but he was a fool of a man. The truth was, Tsunade grimly admitted to herself, was that sake sounded really good around now, but she had promised Shizune to try to keep it to a minimum. There were still a few papers left on her daily pile of paperwork, but Tsunade, standing up and putting on her green robe, headed out of her office towards her house for some much-needed shut-eye. Unlike the late Sandaime, Tsunade refused to reside at the Hokage mansion, and instead chose to live in a normal house, not in the upper-class district, where the Hyuga compound, elders' houses, and the now vacant Uchiha compound could be found, but closer to the market district, where the real Konoha citizens could be found. As she was walking, she turned a corner, she came across the last sight she ever wanted to see, Naruto being beaten up by some drunken villagers. Naruto almost laughed as a haymaker caused lights to explode before his. Was pathetic, really. Their punches were slow and sloppy, their movements drunken and obvious, but Naruto was not able to fight them off. They had him pinned, leaving him unable to use ninjutsu to escape. Taijutsu and weapons weren't an option, wasn't enemy ninja, it was drunken civilians, loyal Konoha residents who had drank one too many and decided to take their personal problems out on the village. Them simply wasn't an option, ally, since there would surely be some slimeball elder in the village who would be more than happy to use a few beat-up drunks as a context to get him exiled or worse. A sharp kick to the ribs broke Naruto out of his reverie. They had gotten some rocks as well and were really beginning to do some real damage. Naruto could feel more bones beginning to crack, which is hardly surprising. What was surprising to Naruto was the sensation of the beating suddenly stopping, as he heard a familiar voice yelling in rage. Tsunade was upon them like a cat among very drunk field mice, throwing punches left and right. It was actually lucky for them she was in a blind rage, as Tsunade's strength, when magnified by her perfect chakra control, would have been more than enough to kill them instantly. As it was, there were 7 bleeding and concussed men laying in the street in under half a minute. Naruto tried his best to look straight at his savior, but his vision blurred as he began to lose consciousness. What he saw did not make complete sense. A tall, glowing silhouette of a woman, features indistinct, obscured by golden hair, knelt protectively over him, holding him in her arms. He croaked out the only thing his brain could compute, punch drunk as he was at the moment. Ka-san, was all he was able to mutter before blacking out. Tsunade quickly bent over Naruto and ascertained his injuries. It was pretty bad, with multiple fractures, and bruises all over. There were many cuts, the attackers thinking of arming themselves before attacking. She couldn't stand the thought of Naruto, the person to restore her hope, bleeding. Her fear of blood threatening to resurface, she steeled herself and picked him up. The hospital would be running on graveyard shift staff only, and was too far away at that. With the speed of a veteran ninja, traversed the rooftops to her house. As one of the greatest physicians of her time, she could do more for him right away than the hospital staff could. Meanwhile, Naruto was struggling internally, his unconscious trying to piece together information of what just happened. Someone saved me. But who? It felt like my mother. No, she died giving birth to me. But it definitely seemed like a motherly figure, protecting me from harm. The concern, the protectiveness, the love and the sorrow, Naruto could not figure out who saved him. Maybe it was my imagination, maybe I'm still in the street, bleeding to death, and this is my mind's way of handling it. His mind screamed into the darkness. Damn you, Fox, so this is how it ends, a 13 years of struggling, only to die the night I get back at the hands of drunks. Is this what you want? The darkness quickly gave way to a world of red. People Naruto had studied under, like Kakashi and Jiraiya, had assumed that since the Kyuubi would offer its power in order to preserve its host's life, that they were somehow symbiotic, that for Naruto it was a useful thing, a conscious reservoir or container of chakra, to be used whenever seen fit. The truth was somewhat bleaker. The Kyuubi was a ravenous creature, an embodiment of rage, eager to whip everything in a sea of flames. The Kyuubi was not a secret weapon. It was a living time bomb. But the demon knew better than to attempt its escape while Naruto was still young and weak. Such an attempt would be akin to trying to escape a prison cell by knocking down a supporting wall. For now, the fox towed the line, silently cursing the human for putting the both of them in such a situation. Had the boy merely been willing to kill a few worthless humans, they wouldn't be in the current situation. Nevertheless, demonic chakra within Naruto knitted his bones together and began to close the numerous gashes. Tsunade quickly laid Naruto down on her bed as soon as she entered her apartment. Shedding her green gambler jacket, she quickly retrieved a medical kit in the adjacent room and quickly returned. Removing his clothes, which were by now caked red with dry blood, she examined him in detail. I should have known. His wounds are already beginning to heal. But that doesn't mean he is in the clear, yet. Getting out a container of antibiotic, pain relief salve, she began rubbing it into his wounds. Many of the cuts could easily infect, otherwise. It made Tsunade sick to her stomach that this could happen. More upsetting was the thought that it was probably not the first time, either. Closing her eyes, she remembered that dark day, 13 years ago. Arashi Kazama, the Yodime of Konoha, and the first foreigner to ever attain rank of Kage in the entire continent, had, in his waning moments, entrusted his newborn son with the awesome responsibility of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, hoping that the lifetime of wine, women and song that Naruto would surely receive as a beloved hero of Konoha, could somehow make up for his being orphaned. Things obviously did not go according to the Yodime's last wish. The salve worked quickly, causing the bruises to fade. However, her rubbing got an unexpected result, as Naruto's member rose to full attention, as, even unconscious, the instincts within Naruto responded to the stimulation of Tsunade's massage. Oh, my, was all that Tsunade could say, as she looked down at Naruto. At that moment, a series of thoughts ran through her head in quick succession. First was the knee-jerk reaction of embarrassment, then triumph as she realized that Naruto would not have responded in such a way if he was still in pain, marking her treatment as a success. A few seconds later, another realization hit Tsunade. He was large for his age. Taking into account his youth, and the fact he had just begun to hit his growth spurts yet, it was amazing. Perhaps it was something inherited from the Yondaime. He was not outrageous in his endowment, but nevertheless stood favorably to an average grown man. There was a small sense of pride in Tsunade as well. Naruto typically claimed her to be a dried-up hag, but it was she who had made Naruto feel this way simply by touching him gently. That then led to another link in her chain of responses, guilt. Not only for her last thought, but for the fact that Naruto would react so extremely to comforting touch. It occurred to her that the only sensation his body was used to from others was abuse. This led to a final thought, a quiet, sly thought that had rested dormant in the back of her head for almost a year and a half now, ever since she had met Naruto, that now drew louder and louder in the back of her mind as she struggled with its implications. I couldn't, could I? Of course not, I'm 4 times his age, the very idea is sick, but, then again, why not? Would it be so bad to make someone who had suffered so much feel good for once? I need this as well. I've been alone so long. Slowly, uncertainty, she inched her hand down his chest, down his stomach, and right as it was about to wrap around Naruto's member, the familiar voice of a curious boy caused the Godimes to bolt upright in shock. Tsunade Bakken, what are you doing? Naruto. I can explain. Standing there, being stared at quizzically by Naruto, Tsunade was mortified. Tears began to form in her eyes as, overwhelmed by guilt, she tried to explain herself. Naruto, I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me, I wasn't thinking, I swear. Naruto closed his eyes and tilted his head to the side, as if he was in deep thought for a few moments, then shrugged his shoulders. It's alright, Ba-chan. No big deal. What? Was all the flabbergasted Hokage could manage. How could anyone be so casual about nearly being robbed of their innocence? I said it's okay. Naruto reaffirmed. Tsunade stood dumbfounded in front of the young ninja. Did he not see what she did? Was he that naive? Naruto, the Godime began slowly. You may be too young to realize, but I was about to take advantage of you. Quote. Naruto looked completely unfazed by the statement, merely raising one eyebrow as if her statement was the most obvious thing on earth, before simply answering, so. Naruto, how can you not care? Tsunade burst out, nearly sobbing at this point. Naruto got up off the bed and moved over to Tsunade, who took a step back uncertainly, her guilt obvious on her face. And why should I care about you touching me a little? Geez Ba-chan, after what those villager idiots were trying to do, I'm just happy to be in one piece. Gently placing a hand on her shoulder, he led the still shaky Godime and sat her on the end of the bed, as he stood next to her, their heads now level. He looked into her dark brown eyes, still tearing a little in the corners, and gave one of his famous grins and said, Look, Tsunade Bachan. I know deep down you'd never try to hurt me. You're one of the people who are precious to me. As a matter of fact, I'm touched you like me enough, think of me that way. Tsunade wiped her eyes, trying to come to terms with what the spiky-haired youth was saying. It was unreal. The idea that he might not be upset seemed too good to be true. But even so, she continued. What I did was still wrong, I easily could have traumatized you, and you are still a child. Naruto shook his head sadly as he interrupted. Traumatize me? Not a chance. This village excels at handing me crap, but I've survived it so far, so I highly doubt you could ever do any worse. Now that I think about it, I really should have counted on those drunks wanting to ambush me on my day back. It was a tactical error on my part for not seeing it coming. I was just lucky you came along. And second of all, Bachan, technically I'm an adult too. The Sandaime let me sign papers making me a legal adult. I've even owned my own apartment since I was 7. At first I didn't understand, but I came to realize that, politically speaking, Ojiazan's hands were tied otherwise. He couldn't really do anything for me, without pissing of the village council. So the best he could do was give me independence and as much money as he could spare. It was actually pretty sweet. I didn't have to put up with a bunch of bull crap from the orphanage, plus I was eligible for a minimum allowance from the government. And once I became genin, I became an adult in the eyes of the ninja community, as you well know. Now, I'm an adult, so I can decide for myself what I do and do not perceive as harassment, and I do not view your actions as harassment. You saved me from people who would have killed me. With this he looked her directly in the eyes, piecing blue meeting soft brown. I trust you, and I know you would never try to hurt me. Someone as strong as you could have made me do whatever you wanted, asleep or not. But all you did was touch me a little. At this moment Naruto's voice faltered for a moment, before adding quietly. My only question, however, is, Kuno, you could have just patched me up and sent me home, so, why me? There are other guys out there that are way stronger and more popular. This time it was Tsunade's turn to interrupt. But they aren't you, Naruto. It was you who revived my belief in Konoha, even winning my grandfather's necklace from me. And if it weren't for you, I would probably be in a casino somewhere, half drunk and broke. I truly admire you, and the truth is, I've just been so lonely ever since Dan died, and when I saw you there, in danger, all alone, I don't know what came over me. The more I think about it, the more I realize that I may have had feelings for you, at least unconsciously, since you defended me from Kabuto. I tried to cover it up, even to myself, because at first I was unsure of how I felt about you, and how Shizune would feel if I took interest. You see, she is Dan's surviving niece, as well as one of my dearest friends and students. I would never want her to feel that I had forgotten Dan, or no longer honored his memory. But it's become clear to me that I need to move on, and your compassion and strength filled me with admiration, and honor. Desire. I have feelings for you, Naruto, but I'm genuinely afraid of what it may mean for us. Once again Naruto donned a look of concentration, as if he were judging every fact from every possible angle. 5 seconds later he spoke up. Well, I like you a lot, and obviously you like me, so it all really comes down to one question then, why don't you be my girlfriend? Tsunade sat in shocked silence for a moment. A small smirk appeared on her lips, which grew into a chuckle, then hearty laughter. This was one of the reasons she was so attracted to him. He was able to take the direst circumstances and make them seem like common occurrences. You make it sound so easy, Naruto. As if I could just snap my fingers and make people accept us being together. Naruto crossed his arms and looked thoughtful for a moment, before saying, well, isn't it kinda like that? I mean, you're a Hokage at a time of post-war, and the village is still fragile, with the only other Hokage candidate being Ero Sennin, who I know for a fact would rather chew off an arm than assume leadership. Ojiazan once told me that the Hokage is the central pillar of the village. Anyone who would try to get you fired just for being my girlfriend would be seen as aiding the Sound Village. The smile on the Hokage's lips softened from humor to contemplation. You're serious about this, aren't you? Datbeo. I'm sick of being alone, and since you feel the same, and you said you like me, why not? Tsunade lowered her head in silence for 5 full minutes, the only noise being the soft buzzing of insects outside, as thoughts running rampart through her mind again, and slowly, a smile formed again on her face, a smile of confidence, as she often had when behind her desk giving orders, the smile of a gambler, willing to lay it all on the line to get what she wants. Okay. Naruto-kun, I'll be your girlfriend, but I'm going to have to lay down some ground rules. Ground rules? Like what? First of all, I want to address what I did tonight. I will never let myself make that mistake again. I want you to know here and now that I will absolutely not pressure you in this. If you want to go back to being professionals, Hokage and Genin, at any time, just say so. I would never be able to live with myself if I thought I was coercing you. Quote, now that I think about it, I got to admit the idea of a medic nin like you trying to play doctor with me was kind of funny, but I would hardly call our interaction in the past as professional, unless you count an insults and name calling as professional. Quote, very funny Naruto, but seriously, second of all, even if we eventually go public with it, we can't go telling people right away. I need to do some political chicanery. Chica, what now? Chicanery? You know, as in subterfuge. I'm going to have to manipulate the political system so that you become the most practical successor to me as Hokage. The closer we are to each other when we tell people of any liaisons, the more natural it will seem. And to top it off, not only will we get to spend time together, but you will receive vital training in the day-to-day duties of Hokage. You sure this isn't all just some huge scam to get me to help you with your paperwork, Ba-chan? Quote. The youth intoned sarcastically. No, it isn't, and that brings us to the final rule, no more calling me, Ba-chan, now or ever again. If we are to be together romantically, more appropriate names are in order, right, Naruto-kun? Quote, yeah, I guess, but I'll need time to think of a good one though. Will Tsunade-chan do for now? Of course, that name would be just fine. In the back of her mind a lone dirty thought buzzed. Well, he did call me Ka-san before he passed out, perhaps someday soon we could role play, I'll be able to get him to call me that again, and again, and again, he. Quickly banishing the perverted thought back into the naughty part of her mind whence it came, she stood up and got her gambler coat back on. Ahem, well anyway, if you're okay with the plan I've laid out, I think I should take you back to your apartment. You'll need as much rest as you can get before I announce your apprenticeship tomorrow. Tsunade-chan, not sure how to break this to you. I know I just got back to the village, and everything, but given what happened to me tonight, there's a 95% chance my apartment is trashed. Quote. Tsunade sighed bitterly at this revelation, rubbing her temples to ward off any oncoming headaches, both of frustration for her newfound, and for herself at the prospect of the paperwork the insurance claims would create. All right, you get some rest here then. As you clothes are pretty much ruined, I'll see to that you have some fresh, fitting clothes for the morning. There's a tailor that owes me a favor that's opens early a few blocks down. I'll be back in time to wake you up, at which time you'll need to get going before Shizune comes to wake me. I'll break the news to her quietly and discreetly tomorrow. I believe she will understand, but nevertheless, it wouldn't be tactful if she came by in the morning and found you in my bed. Quote. Naruto yawned, fatigue catching up with him. Thanks, I am kinda tired, so we were up all night talking, huh? With this he eased himself back into the bed, dozing off almost immediately. As Tsunade slipped on her heeled sandals and got up to go, the half-asleep boy spoke, barely above a whisper. Thank you, Tsunade-chan, for everything. You're welcome, Naruto-kun, I'll wake you up when it's morning. With this she walked out into the lit streets, an unusual spring in her step. 2 hours later, the Godime walked into her office, surprising almost everyone on the morning shift. Hokage-sama, you sure are early today. Normally Shizune-san has to bring you in around noon. Well, I didn't get much sleep, and besides today is a very important day, could arrange for a meeting between myself, Jiraiya, the Junin instructors and the village elders this afternoon, if you could, please. And also, when you see Shizune, please direct her to my office, there is a personal matter I need to discuss with her. Slipping out just as the sun began coming up 4 hours after falling asleep, the still groggy Naruto made his way, first to his house, then to the Hokage Tower. Just as he had suspected, his apartment had undergone significant vandalism the last night, with almost every window broken and more than a few dead foxes littering the floor. They sure love to be direct, he reflected, as he left for Ichiraku's ramen shop to fill his stomach. What followed for him was a day mostly filled with insurance claims, kidnapping and discounted ramen. Old man Ichiraku was a sympathetic soul, letting have ramen almost for free upon finding out what happened to his favorite customer's house. In the evening a Chunin messenger came around to tell him that the Godime wanted to see his as soon as possible. Upon reaching the office, he found her alone at the desk. Did everything go all right, Tsunade-chan? Quote. I think so. Shizune was a bit upset at first, but I think she just needs a little time to get used to the idea. As for the village elders, I've backed them into a situation wherein they must accept you as my new protege, replacing Sakura. I threatened to abandon my post as Hokage if they did not accept. Much like you predicated, they caved in once they realized Jiraiya would have no intentions of replacing me. What about Sakura-san? Doesn't this sort of sabotage her career as a medic nin? As a medic nin, maybe, but I feel that someone who lacks compassion really wasn't qualified to become a high-level medic nin. When I found out about how she responded to your return, I felt that having her around would be detrimental, and anyway it's not as if I'm ruining her life. I've given her a good reference, so she can always find employment as a nurse or orderly at the hospital. If anything, such a subpar kunoichi should be so lucky as to be guided, away from a genuinely dangerous lifestyle. Quote, so, then I'm in. Yes, starting tomorrow you will be helping me with my paperwork, as well as helping me to greet and entertain dignitaries from the village hidden in the grass when they arrive in the afternoon. Also, I informed Kakashi that his team was officially dissolved. Kakashi-sensei always paid too much attention to Sasuke Tem anyway, but what do I do for new jutsus now? I don't want to become a pencil pusher, and besides, I have to be on a team to participate in Chunin exams. Quote, I know, let me explain. I know you probably think paperwork and diplomacy is boring, so to help you ease into your new duties, I've arranged it so that you're now free to join as an add-on to any team you wish, provided you have the instructors and all teammates' permission. This will allow you more fluidity in your instruction. For example, taijutsu training with Guy, genjutsu training with Kurenai, you get the idea. Naruto was practically leaping up and down in unbridled enthusiasm at this point. Kick-ass, at this rate, I'm gonna become Hokage so fast it'll make everyone's head spin. Alright, settle down. I'm glad you're happy, but it's getting late, let's head back home and get some rest. Quote, oh, that's right, after receiving your insurance claims for the damage done to your house, if decided to let you move in until the repairs are finished. So we're roomies now. Well, we are boyfriend and girlfriend now, right, Naruto-kun? So then there's nothing wrong with it. And I certainly won't stand by while my cute new boyfriend gets hassled and vandalized by bullies. An almost imperceptible smile developed, as Tsunade proposed her next idea. Tell you what say we go get dinner at that ramen place you like so much, then we'll head back to my place for dessert. Yeah, Ichiraku ramen is the best. What will we be having for dessert? You'll see. In the meantime, as the sun began setting on another day in the ninja village of Konohagire, the gears of fate made another of their quirky turns, as a certain trench coat and fishnet wearing sadist began filling out a Junin instructor job application form. Anko Mitarashi was the kind of woman who, when faced with problems, retreated into work. But this time, she was seeking a change of pace. After all, she reasoned, it was the work that she did as being a supposed torturer and assassin that earned her the stares and hatred she was so sick of. Being Orochimaru's former apprentice didn't help either, she grimaced. Most people would not go within 10 feet of her if she was walking down the street, and for all the men that approached her, every last one ran away like a coward upon getting to know her. She reflected that she would do anything to keep her mind off her frustrations, even a technical lowering of rank, from special Junin to Junin instructor would be a relief, as long as teaching would take her mind of her troubles. And as an added bonus, she mused with a grin, that cute kid whose blood tasted so good from the Chunin exam was back, and from what she had heard, technically without a team, so there was always a chance. And at the exact same moment, across town, a quiet, pale-eyed girl sat in her room in the Hyuga compound filling out a team transfer form. Although she was never one to seek out conflict, the fact was that she just couldn't take her team anymore. After her father's morning lecturing ran late, she had traveled to the training ground where her sensei then lectured her for being tardy. It was like she was completely unsympathetic to others' problems. The adult were sometimes overheard calling her Ice Princess, and upon getting to know her for a year and a half, Hinata decided the name was fairly apt. Her teammates were annoying too. One self-centered to the point of being offensive, the other a blank slate, both gave no concrete support for our endeavors at all, other than the obligatory, good for you, or half-hearted, don't give up. Completely disheartened, she began training with them that morning in combat practice. One dynamic marking mishap later, she was resolved to join a different team after all. Boys who either had fleas or seemed to be robots were just not for her, and now that her beloved had returned and would need new teammates, after Uchiha had left and the Haruno bitch thankfully never had any interest, there was a chance. Naruto sneezed twice as he lay in Tsunade's bed, both basking in post-coitus glow, her taller form snuggling up behind him, her bountiful bosom pressing against the back of his head. Man, I'd better not be getting a cold, he mumbled. As her hands subconsciously wrapped around him gently, he leaned his head against what was rapidly becoming his favorite new pillows. His last thoughts before falling asleep was, I'm so happy I've found Tsunade-chan, who really loves me, but truthfully, had someone told me a year ago this was going to happen, I would have laughed in their face. Well, at least things are looking up for the both of us, and at least I know things couldn't possibly get any weirder than the last 2 days. With this, Naruto joined his lover in slumber, both content for the first time in a long while. It would take 3 days, and 11 hours, the amount of time it would take Anko and Hinata's paperwork to be processed, for Naruto Uzumaki to find out just how weird things could really get. Above the hidden village of Konohagakure, scattered snowflakes drifted lazily from an overcast sky, blanketing the world in white and heralding a beautiful winter's day for the village's residents. Half a year had passed since the humid summer night when the Godime Hokage and the outcast ninja No. En as Uzumaki Naruto had conspired to be together as a couple, despite social convention and personal risk. So far they have done quite well. Naruto's life was slowly improving in quality, although his responsibilities grew as well. Hey, Naruto, you're late. You know how the Hokage gets when she has to do the evening paperwork by herself, yelled a Chunin currently standing guard at the entrance to the Hokage's tower. I know, the fair-haired youth yelled out as he sped past him, into the tower. Dashing up the stairs he stopped just short of the office door. Tell the Hokage that I'm here for my lessons, will ya? He said quickly to the Ambu stationed at the door. Nodding his head, the Ambu opened the door to announce Naruto's arrival, just in time to dodge a rather large book that came flying past. Naruto crept into the office. Papers were spilled over the floor and an extremely frustrated woman was inside digging though a pile, tossing ones she didn't need. Over her shoulder. The guard quickly shut the door behind Naruto so no other scholarly projectiles could get to him. His job was no picnic, the guard reflected, but he didn't envy Naruto, either. He may have been a brat and a hassle, but even the dreaded fox child didn't deserve having to work direct. TLY under that woman every day. The guard shuddered at the thought. Still, more power to him. The guard thought. It wasn't every person who was groomed to become the next leader of Konoha. Meanwhile, said fox child approached the desk where his lover rummaged though numerous important-looking documents. NTS. Hey Tsunade-chan, it's 7:00, I'm here for my lessons. Tsunade grunted without looking up. Sure, go grab a chair, I'll be with you as soon as I grab this stupid contract. Naruto took a seat and began organizing some of the papers on the desk. It was a good thing he was around, he thought bemusedly. Ever since Shizune decided to open up her own private medical practice, Tsunade seemed lost at her job, now being without a secretary. And in the end that was what Naruto had more or less become in recent months. The village was taken in by Tsunade's deft political maneuverings, leaving the now 14-year-old Naruto as the sole possible successor for Hokage, for Tsunade had proclaimed that due to personal conflict between her career and personal life, she would step down from her role in a mere 3 years' time. Leaving not enough time for another candidate, even among the Junins, whose ranks were still painfully thin after the sound invasion, to present themselves in the village's ninja population, but enough time to mold Naruto into a respected leader. As such, all of the civilian population and most of the ninja population no longer questioned their daily proximity to one another. This plan would of course make her protege a young Hokage of 17 years. Almost unheard of, but not impossible to accomplish, as Gaara of the Sand had already ascended to Kazekage at the age of 14. To become Hokage at such a young age, however, meant a lot of hard work for Naruto, who every evening would spend his time learning diplomacy and etiquette from his beloved Tsunade, who despite her closeness was quite demanding in his instruction. There were mountains of papers every day, from mission submissions to legislation from the council, and every day, Tsunade would save some more of the difficult ones for her, Naruto-kun, to handle. Okay, I found it. Tsunade grinned triumphantly as she went over to her now organized desk and plopped a medium scroll down. What's this? It's a new trade agreement for this upcoming year. Namely for trading rights with some mining towns, some of which could be considered on the border with Earth Nation. So price negotiations will include them as well. Just great. From what I've read on the Earth Nation, most of their negotiators are ancient fogies that have lived through the Leaf Rock War. Those guys are rude as hell and impossible to negotiate with. Are you suggesting that I'm ancient, Naruto? Tsunade said half jokingly, half threateningly. No, no, no. Naruto quickly stammered. I'm just saying there is still bad blood between the Fire and Earth countries. And if we don't get good terms on these agreements, the price on almost all ninja tools in Fire country could as much as double. Well, then, let's have a look and see if we can't find a village on this map over here, smaller than the others that might be willing to sell cheaper. If we can set up contracts with them, the other villages will have to lower their prices to stay competitive. Of course, we will have to pretend as if we couldn't care either way, otherwise they will catch on and raise their prices to match. Pay attention, Naruto, a good Hokage can do more than just deceive his opponents in battle, but at the negotiating tables as well. Manipulating supply and demand effectively can lower cost for imports. And so the Hokage lectured her, student, as Naruto fought to keep his eyes open. 3 hours later their work was completed. Tsunade grinned with satisfaction. Well, this seems in order, I'll send it out tomorrow. Let's head home. Putting on her favorite green robe, she and Naruto walked out of the office. As they made their way to Tsunade's house, Naruto reflected on the work they had done that day. It had all bored him to tears, but he put up with it for 2 reasons. The first being that it was quickly shaping him into a mentally quick and savvy politician, able to memorize treaties and spot flaws in them, as well as almost instantly figuring out which of the village's available ninja were best for any missions Konoha received. The other reason for Naruto's unusual patience was that Tsunade's hard businesslike exterior would crumble as soon as work was over, and she would reward him with 2 of his favorite things every night after work. A home-cooked ramen dinner and an intimate night together. He had come to long for those scant few hours in the late night where they would make passionate love to each other, for as much as Naruto deemed himself a gentleman and not a pervert like Jiraiya, he had to admit to himself that he was in love with one of the most beautiful, strong, willful, kind and generous lovers a man could ever want. Every night was a little different. Sometimes slow and achingly sensual, other times rushed and frenzied. Control was also always shifting, for although Tsunade was taller and much stronger than her partner, and enjoyed being on top, she treated him as an equal in the bedroom, despite his inexperience, sometimes just laying back and allowing Naruto to experiment. She would moan and gasp as he nibbled, licked, kissed, and caressed her body, finding the best ways to please her. And in the end it didn't matter what they did in those scant few hours, or even how they did it, as long as they did it together. And so they did. The one thing that was always the same was the closeness. That would always be face to face, kissing as they went. It was a nightly ritual that had begun once they began living together on a permanent basis. Naruto's apartment had been condemned when safety inspectors examined his vandalized house and had found it unsafe to live in. Apparently when he had moved in the place was infested with cockroaches and termites and the landlord never bothered to mention the fact to him. At Tsunade's insistent urging, Naruto then moved into his girlfriend, boss's apartment, until you find a new place. Which was tacitly understood to be never, as no landlord in the village really wanted the infamous prankster as a tenant, and Tsunade was just as happy with having her love as a house mate. The village's reaction to their living arrangements was surprisingly indifferent. The Hokage finally has that troublesome fox on a short leash, they would say. Most were relieved that due to some miracle on the Godime's part, Naruto was growing up and ceasing his pranks. The initial objections of the elders at the Kyubi, being Tsunade's choice for student successor, when meeting with no results from the public and fierce opposition from the Hokage, eventually burned out. Now all that remained was the occasional grumble from the impotent council. To the whole village it seemed that the scoundrel monster was being molded into a fine shinobi, all due to the slug Sanin's influence. There were less cold eyes as Naruto walked the streets, and more nods of acknowledgement. But naturally, the whole village was still ignorant of the extent of their relationship. They had decided to keep it a secret until Naruto became Hokage, at which point he would have the prestige and influence to be with whomever he so chose, although Tsunade had once personally confided in Naruto that if it were up to her, she would drag him to the center of the marketplace, and make love to him in the middle of the dirt road there for all the world to see, but for now, they kept it a tightly held secret. One which only came to light in the form of late nights stretched into the pre-dawn hours by two people so very much in love. But those nightly respites only lasted so long, before the sun began climbing the sky again and the dozing couple would have to rouse themselves and head to their work. Tsunade would go off to her office and Naruto would head to the training grounds, to his new Junin instructor, Anko Mitarashi. She had gotten her wish when she had sent in the paperwork to become a Junin instructor in the late summer, and she now had her own two-man, elite, team studying under her. Consisting of Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga, the boy being groomed to become Hokage, and the heir of the Hyuga main branch respectively, two of the most prestigious genin in all of Konoha. The team was very effective, despite the wild difference in temperaments. Hinata for once never felt like she was being ignored, as although Anko was far more abrasive and rough than Kurenai ever could have dreamt of being, she was also active in their training, giving constant feedback, and in her own scary kind of way, encouragement. And Naruto finally had a sensei that didn't hold back giving him powerful jutsu. By the end of their first 2 weeks training, Naruto had mastered the Shadow Snake's technique and Hinata had learned to meld the speed and accuracy of her Hyuga-style Jukin to fiercer brawling styles. Now not only did her strikes hit fast, she also hit hard, doing far more damage per hit than even her cousin Neji could accomplish. The students also brought out positive qualities in the teacher. Hinata was competent and responsive to directions, although sometimes too shy and apologetic for Anko's taste, but nevertheless had great combat potential, which Anko brought out of her, much to her family's approval. Naruto was the opposite. Instead of shying away and following orders without question, he would often butt heads with his sensei. A typical conversation could run anywhere from a disagreement on assassination tactics to which was better, ramen or dango. They would always find something to argue about, yet neither would truly be angry with each other. Much like at the ramen shop half a year ago, Anko and Naruto's aggressiveness formed a kind of effortless communication. They were always able to understand each other's feelings. In addition, his stubborn never-say-die attitude allowed him to persevere tough any training exercise, or the toughest mission. So far, the elite team's success only added to Naruto's gradual acceptance by, if not the Konoha general populace, the ninja community. The following day at the end of practice, Naruto and Hinata were exhausted as usual. Anko had worked them both to the bone using repeated exercise drills and relentless jutsu practice. Looking at the position of the sun, Naruto gasped out loud. Damn it, it's already 6 o'clock already. You worked us too long today, Anko-sensei, I'm gonna be late. Then be late. Get one thing straight Uzumaki, you're only going to get better if you practice. I'm not sure what Hokage-sama is thinking wanting you to be her protege, but because you are being considered the Hokage must be the strongest of all the village shinobi, and by a wide margin I might add. You'll do little good to Konoha as another bureaucratic pencil pusher. Yeah, I'm plenty strong already. And by the time Tsunade-sama decides to retire, I'll be the greatest Hokage ever. Quote, big talk, little man. Just get going. We will meet back here tomorrow at 8 o'clock sharp. More drills. I'm going to put in a request for B-rank missions for our group in about a week, so keep your body and mind sharp in the meantime. Quote. With practice over, Naruto sped down the road toward the Hokage Tower at top speed. After a few minutes though, he slowed down, as he heard Hinata as she came running after him. What's wrong, Hinata-chan? Quote. I wanted to ask you something earlier but you ran off as soon as practice ended. So what's up? At this Hinata began tapping her index fingers together. Naruto-kun, I was wondering if Tsunade-sama was looking to have another medical nin apprentice. I know that Sakura-san studied under her for a while, and since you are her student I was wondering. Ah, I get it, trying to get away from Anko-sensei, No, not at all. In fact, I think Anko-sensei is the best teacher I've ever had. She doesn't really know a lot about herbs and medicine, just poisons. And I've always been interested in medicine more than fighting, despite my family's wishes for me to be a warrior. I got an idea, since I'm heading to see Tsunade-chan right now. You can talk to her about it face to face. Oh, no I couldn't. It wouldn't be my place to, but before she could voice her protests, Naruto had taken her by the hand and had begun running towards the Hokage's tower again. Secretly, a part of Hinata was thrilled that Naruto was holding her hand. Although from a practical standpoint, she legitimately wanted to become a medic nin, she would have been lying to herself if it wasn't partly about being around the young man she adored all day as well. However, she was also mortified that she was about to ask the Hokage for such a large favor. As they ran, a thought occurred to Hinata, as to what Naruto had said when referring to the Godime. Tsunade-chan. He calls the Hokage, Tsunade-chan. Weird. And with that, Naruto, with Hinata in tow sped off to the Hokage Tower, trying desperately to be on time. At the office, Naruto and Tsunade both chatted with an amicable ease that seemed be more relaxed than an average teacher and student, once or twice. Even finishing each other's sentences. And as it turned out, Tsunade was more than happy to hear the young Hyuga out, and agreed that even a two-person group should have a medic nin in it. With a promise to meet at a later day to pound out the details, Hinata excused herself. While walking away from the tower in the direction of the Hyuga compound, Hinata stopped dead in her tracks. Her internal, Naruto stock-o-meter, was going full tilt. Turning around and sitting on a nearby bench, she activated her Byakugan and watched the tower. Evening was setting in and most people were heading home for dinner. Although she would sure be lectured by her father for not coming home on time, she wanted to find out what her personal hero was learning from the most famous kunoichi in the 5 nations, and perhaps learn about the Godime's teaching style. By the time Naruto and Tsunade left together at around 11 at night, Hinata's curiosity had been roused into jealous suspicion. Perhaps it was all in her imagination, but when in the office they had acted like teacher and student, but as they walked to their house they seemed far closer. It didn't help that Tsunade's left hand was dangerously close to grabbing Naruto's rear as they walked. As she followed them at a safe distance, her suspicions heightened. In the old days, Naruto would always go to Ichiraku after his work was done, even if they were closing up. She knew this through stalking Naruto extensively of course, but instead they were now heading directly back to the Hokage's house, and at an almost hurried rate. She had heard that he was living in the same house as the Hokage since his apartment had been torn down. Waiting 15 minutes after they entered the house, she activated her Byakugan again, and her heart leapt to her throat as her most paranoid fear came to life. A small heap of clothes lay on the floor. On the couch, the Godime and Naruto were kissing each other passionately as their hands explored each other. Hinata felt like her world had just been shattered. All of Hinata's doubt and self-loathing, which had been worn away by degrees since Naruto's return, came rushing back. How could she have been so blind? What had made her think for a second that she had a chance, if he was already involved with the strongest woman in the world? And the worst realization of all came when she saw the look in each of their eyes. They were without a doubt, truly in love. Breaking into tears, Hinata ran off blindly down the road, sobbing. Naruto's head jerked up at the sound. Oh, crap, I think someone is outside. Sighing and shaking her head, Tsunade got up and began dressing. Yes, and I have a fairly good idea who, too. It was Hinata. The Hokage said calmly. Hinata. So she saw us. We've got to talk to her before she tells anyone. No, Naruto, you go alone. I'll stay here. If she saw me right now, I think things would be made even worse. Why is that? You really are dense sometimes, aren't you, Naruto? She has a crush on you. What? Naruto looked at Tsunade, thunderstruck. Right now she must hate me so much. Tsunade mused. Oh, Kami, I had no idea. Tsunade sighed deeply. But almost everyone else in the village did, including myself, and it seems I have allowed my private life and duties as Hokage to come into conflict. I mistakenly thought I could keep our relationship a secret, while simultaneously allowing Hinata the benefits of becoming a medic nin under my tutelage, but I was wrong. I guess she intuited that something was odd between us, and she followed us. So this awkward situation is really my fault. Don't blame yourself, Tsunade-chan. I will find Hinata and I'll convince her to keep us a secret. With that, Naruto quickly dressed and headed out the door in pursuit of Hinata. Looking around, Hinata found herself by the edge of one of Konoha's numerous wooded areas. Cold, alone and utterly miserable, she leaned up against a tree, sniffling and weeping quietly. Hearing a rustle in the nearby grass, Hinata turned and saw a figure gathering moss from the side of an adjacent tree. Who's there? Hinata squeaked out. The figure stiffened and turned in Hinata's direction. That voice, Hinata Hyuga. Is that you? What are you doing out here? It's past midnight. As the figure continued to approach, Hinata recognized the speaker. Shizune-sama. Shizune, medical ninja and former disciple of the slug Sanin Tsunade, stood in front of the cold, tired and distraught Hyuga. Hinata, what are you doing out here at this time of night? You'll catch your death. Quote. Looking closer, she saw the pale-eyed girl was crying. By Kami, what happened to you? Are you alright? I just got a little lost is all. I'm fine, really. The young Hyuga sniffed as she shivered from the winter's night chill. You don't look fine to me. Stay out in the snow any longer and you'll get sick. There are dry clothes and a warm fire waiting for us, so let's go. Hinata's eyebrows rose in realization as she asked a question of her own. You're camping out in the middle of winter. Shizune smiled softly at the girl's inquisitiveness. I'll tell you what, when we get back to my campsite I'll tell you all about it. As much as Hinata didn't feel like being with anyone right then, she had to admit dry clothes sounded nice. Picking herself up, she began walking with Shizune. After 15 minutes of trudging through the snow, Hinata found herself inside a tent, wearing a set of dry, if slightly oversized clothes that Shizune had brought along, sipping instant tea that the helpful medical ninja had prepared. Setting down her basket of herbs and mosses, Shizune poured herself a cup. Now that you finally have some color in your face, why don't you really tell me why you were out in the woods at this hour? I highly doubt that someone with one of the village's most effective tracking dojutsus could get lost while still inside Konoha's gates. Shifting uncomfortably, Hinata quickly attempted to change the subject. Excuse me, Shizune-san, but what were you doing out in the woods? Those plants you were gathering, wouldn't it be safer to do it during the day? Shizune smiled softly. Believe it or not, there are some rare medicinal herbs that are only potent when picked at night. Even in the chill of winter, they wither during the day. I run my own clinic now, and I was collecting medicine for it when I came across you. You actually gave me quite a scare. If I hadn't heard you crying I might have walked right past you and you'd have been a popsicle by morning. What would possess you to do something like that? I just needed some time alone is all. Shizune absent-mindedly tapped one finger against her chin, attempting a guess as to the girl's problems. Although the girl was notoriously thin-skinned, clearly something significant had her upset. Sitting down next to Hinata, she smiled reassuringly. You know, whatever the problem is, you can tell me. You promise you won't tell anyone. Doctor-patient confidentiality. I swear it. So what is the problem? More problems at home. Would you like to talk about that? I also heard that you had a falling out with Kurenai-san. No, nothing like that. My family life is always a little strained, but never enough to cause me to run away. And as for Kurenai-sensei, well, I know she is a good kunoichi, and maybe even a good teacher, but I never really felt like we made a connection. Anko-sensei is able to motivate me far better. No, the main problem I'm having, it's about Naruto-kun. As you may have heard, we are now in a team under Anko-sensei. When it happened I was really happy, because I thought that if we worked together enough he might notice me more. But just when I thought I was getting close to him, it turns out I was already too late. He's already seeing someone. Matters of the heart, and with Naruto no less. I see. At this Shizune's smile grew a bit rueful with understanding. So you know about Naruto and Tsunade-sama, then? Hinata was absolutely and completely taken aback. How did you know? Not saying anything for a moment, Shizune poured herself another cup of tea, and after taking a first sip, said, I've known about it for a while, actually. When they first began being together, about half a year ago, I was the only person they told. At first I was more than a little hurt. The woman I looked up to as a teacher and role model and even a kind of aunt, was risking her career and standing in the village getting involved with someone a third her age. And what's worse, I felt not only was I losing a mentor, but a little brother, too. But nevertheless I honored their secret, and as they grew closer and closer to each other, I slowly drifted out of their lives, eventually putting all of my energy into my studies, and began pursuing my own career in medicine, which is actually the very reason I'm out here tonight. Hinata looked on wide-eyed as Shizune talked. Shizune knew exactly what she was going through, having been set aside by Naruto and Tsunade's relationship as well. It was hard for the both of them. But for Hinata the sting was still fresh and unbearable, as Naruto still meant far more to her than she could put into words. The worst part, Hinata reflected, as she stared into the bottom of her teacup, was that she couldn't even fight for Naruto's affections. What chance did a 14-year-old introvert have against the legendary slug Sannin, be it in terms of charms, experience, or if it came down to it, body? Absolutely none. Hinata murmured, as much to herself as to Shizune, do you hate Tsunade-sama? Quote. Shizune shook her head at that. No, I could never hate Tsunade, but at first I was angry at them both, for risking everything in what I thought was simply a flight of fancy. But, as time passed I eventually came to understand that they were sincere in their feeling and pure in their motivations. They had simply fallen in love. And that is something that no one can control. They had never meant to hurt me. They just had to be true to themselves. Hinata sighed at this. So, they really are in love, huh? I didn't want to believe it but I saw it in their eyes when they thought they were alone. What will I do now? Her teacup empty, Shizune got out a small piece of parchment and began writing. Without looking up she said, well Hinata, that it really up to you, now isn't it? As for myself, I now have a successful career, not to mention a clinic with almost 100 patients that need caring for, and over 20 doctors and nurses in my employ. The truth was I could not study under Tsunade forever, so in a way it is just as well. Quote, what do you mean, up to me? I couldn't never fairly win Naruto's heart away from Tsunade-sama, you said yourself they were truly in love, and as much as I would like to drive them apart, I can't do it, knowing it would hurt Naruto. And I know it sounds weak, but I don't think I can move on from him either. I love him with all my heart. At first I thought it was merely hero worship, but I honestly love him. Handing Hinata the roll of parchment she had been writing on, she said, if you truly love him, then just love him, and do. Not worry about what you know can't be changed. Just concentrate on conveying your feelings to Naruto, and everything will take care of itself. Like I said before, a person can't help who they fall in love with. All you can do is be true to yourself. It seems to be working for them. I'm sure it will work for you, as well. All dried off now, Hinata nodded her head with a small amount of understanding, as she got up to leave. Thank you, Shizune-sama. Talking with you has helped me a little. You're welcome, Hinata. Your Byakugan should get you back to the Hyuga compound without incident, but just in case, take that signed letter to Hiyashi-san. It will explain that you were helping me gather herbs tonight. It should calm him down. The last thing we need is the Hyugas starting a manhunt, thinking you've been kidnapped. Take care of yourself, Hinata. Quote. Once outside, Hinata activated her Byakugan, and realized she was in fact only a few miles from the Hyuga compound. Rushing home, she clutched the letter in her hand. Although she moved with speed to alleviate the anxiety of her family, her mind was elsewhere. She would have a lot to talk about with Naruto tomorrow, and Tsunade-sama, as well. Naruto had returned home empty-handed, his searches for Hinata being unsuccessful. Sorry, Tsunade-chan, I couldn't find her anywhere. She's not at the Hyuga compound, or any of the other places she normally hangs out at. It's alright, Naruto-kun. With any luck, once she lets off some steam, she'll still show up to your team training tomorrow. You just contact her after practice and ask her to come to my office for an important meeting. She knows to put personal problems aside when it comes to her duty as Ashinobi. Unlike myself, Tsunade added mentally. Hinata's not in trouble, is she? Naruto asked nervously. Tsunade looked out the window at the village street outside their house. On the contrary, depending how reasonable she is willing to be, we may be the ones in a lot of trouble tomorrow. But for now, the best thing you and I can do is rest and get ready. It was already well past midnight, and they both were emotionally exhausted. Heading to bed, Naruto and Tsunade did not snuggle together as was their custom, both were too occupied by their own thoughts. The next day's team training transpired with unusual silence. Hinata was utterly silent and less spoken to, and Naruto seemed unusually glum, his usual antics and arguments missing from the routine. Anko noticed that something was amiss between the two, but let it slide. Making a note to herself that she would have to have a talk with them later on. After the practice, after Anko had left, Naruto walked up to Hinata. Tsunade kind of wants to talk with us. I know, but I'd like to talk with you privately first, if that's alright. Just me. Naruto gulped as they began to walk towards the Hokage's tower, taking a route off the main roads so they would have more privacy. He knew he wasn't the greatest conversationalist in the world, and was worried he might make things worse by opening his big mouth. So, you and Tsunade-sama, huh? Hinata slowly began. Yeah, but she's like your mother, isn't she? Quote. Naruto internally flashed back to his and Tsunade's many nighttime role-playing adventures and merely quipped, some nights more than others. What? Nothing. Nothing, Naruto quickly said dismissively. Look, I know it seems really weird and out there, but... Hinata interjected, saying what had taken her all morning to work up the nerve for. I know, you genuinely care for her. I have to admit though, I'm a little sad. I had always hoped that we would end up together. You know, Naruto, I know I'm not as strong or as beautiful or as confident as Tsunade-sama, but the fact is that I have had feelings for you for quite a long time, as far back as the academy, and it really hurt when I found out that you had chosen Tsunade. Not just because I felt rejected, but also because you didn't even trust me enough to tell me. Naruto kicked a rock out of the path as the tower rapidly neared. He was more than a little guilty, now that he thought about how his romance with Tsunade affected his friend. I'm sorry, Hinata. I know we're teammates, and maybe I should have trusted you as a friend to keep my secret, but I was just so afraid of what would happen to Tsunade if people found out. I don't really care what people think of me, but I don't think I could handle Tsunade-chan being hurt like that. After another awkward pause, Naruto continued. You know, Until Tsunade told me, after you ran away yesterday, I honestly didn't know you thought about me that way. I guess I really can be dense sometimes. I still do, Naruto, even now. Hinata quipped, but before Naruto could inquire as to what she meant, they were at the front door of the main tower. It quickly became obvious that something was up, as the closer they got to the Hokage's office, the few people they saw, even the regulars, like Izumo Kazuki or Katetsu Hogan were absent, along with the Anbu guard. The entire top floor was deserted. Obviously the Hokage had ordered them off, to ensure privacy for high-level meetings. Quote, Tsunade was sitting at her desk. Her countenance was calm and powerful. With a nod to both Naruto and Hinata, she gestured towards some chairs in front of her desk. Please, have a seat. After both teenagers sat down, Tsunade continued. Hinata Hyuga, it has come to my attention that you have become aware of certain events concerning Naruto and myself. I brought you here today to allow you to understand our situation, and ask for your discretion. Quote, although apparently calm on the outside, Hinata was petrified with fear. After all, it wasn't every day that someone tried to intervene in the romantic affairs of the most powerful kunoichi in the world. Something about how Tsunade had said the words made it very clear that she was to keep her mouth shut and butt out of their business. I will not give up, Hinata's mantra repeated over and over inside her head, as she steadied herself for her next words. Tsunade-sama, as for your situation, I already realize that you and Naruto-kun are in love, but that doesn't change the fact that I am also in love with Naruto. Hinata tried her best to ignore the holes Tsunade's eyes were boring into her skull and continued. What I ask for is that in return for my discretion in this matter, I be allowed to date Naruto. Naruto was shocked. Hinata, Gomen, but I couldn't, I would never betray Tsunade like that. I'm not saying you have to cheat on her. She can even join in, if she so desires. But I ask you to understand that my feelings are every bit as legitimate as Tsunade's, and not to be discarded. Naruto was silent for a moment, and then said, I'm sorry, Hinata-chan, but I love Tsunade, and she will have to learn how to share. Hinata interjected, her face filled with a determination Naruto had only once before. It was the same determination as when she fought Neji. Tsunade took a deep breath, coming to terms with what Hinata had just said. That's quite a lot that you're asking out of both of us, Hinata. Even if we were to agree to your request. Tsunade-chan. Tsunade raised her hand, silencing Naruto's outburst, and continued. While it is true we are hardly in a position to deny you any request at this point, you need to understand. And that what you are asking might be understood in some people as swinging. Yes, I've considered that, Tsunade-sama. And I've come to the conclusion that I don't care. I love Naruto with all my heart. And that I will do anything to be with him, even if that means sharing him with you. Turning to Naruto, Hinata's voice shifted to a quieter, less confident tone. Although it might be nice, it actually really doesn't matter to me if you share your bed with me, Naruto. All I am asking is that I be important to you, even if not in the same way as Tsunade. She sighed and looked down at the ground, shame clearly covering her face, as her resolve of a moment ago had left, her own self-doubt returning. Naruto looked uncertainly at Tsunade, who nodded to him. Placing a finger under Hinata's chin, he lifted her head up, saying, You are important to me, Hinata-chan. And although I can't say that you mean the same to me what Tsunade-chan does, I would be honored if you would remain by my side, as a friend, and as a precious person who loves me. It's just that, someone as great as you should have someone who can devote themselves 100%, and I can't do that. You deserve better. Quote. Looking into his eyes she responded, I don't want better, I want you. Upon hearing this, Tsunade sighed. There was no avoiding it now. Hinata would now part of their lives, both public and private. Clearing her throat to break them out of their saccharine moment, she then said, Very well then, Hinata. It seems we've come to an agreement. I will share Naruto with you, But please understand that I love him with every ounce of my soul, and if you ever make an attempt to come between us, I'll regret it. Severely. Hinata gulped and nodded her head vigorously. Tsunade then reached into a shelf of her desk and produced a bottle of sake and 3 cups, pouring for each person. Taking hers in her hand, she then said, "Well then, I propose a toast, to new endeavors." All 3 drank their sake, Hinata coughing and spluttering, unused to drinking alcohol, earning her a smirk from Tsunade, who downed her cup without blinking. Hinata realized the bittersweet taste of the drink went well with her situation. She had what she had desired more than anything, finally. But there was a role in Naruto's life that was already fulfilled by Tsunade, that of his soulmate, and she had no right to interfere. Looking at the bottom of her cup, deeply in thought, Tsunade shook her head. She was still getting used to the idea of allowing Hinata to pursue a relationship with Naruto. But although she would never let it show through her stoic exterior, she loathed the idea of sharing the most important person in her life with anyone. Looking at the Hyuga girl, Tsunade commented slyly, "If you'll really be seeing Naruto daily after training from now on, I guess then we will need to make an excuse for you coming by my office so often. Naruto is still my protege, you know. Perhaps you would still like to try your hand at being a medical ninja?" Tsunade asked while pouring the Hyuga another drink. The Hokage's posture and intonation sounded almost challenging. To Hinata it was clear what Tsunade was really saying. "Are you sure you have the guts to go through with Is Hinata, who 48 hours ago, was jumping at the bit to study under Tsunade, now chaffed at the idea of being a student of her rival, but practically, it was a good idea. Their secret was now also her secret, and by studying under Tsunadeime as a medical ninja, in addition to her regular lessons under Anko, she would be in proximity to Naruto almost all day without raising anyone's suspicions. The young Hyuga looked uncertain for a moment, but her countenance hardened into a thin determined smile as she said, "I think that I would like that very much." She then downed her cup in one go, not batting an eyelash, even as the bitter drink burned a path down her throat. If Tsunade could do it, then so could she. Naruto, examining both women's actions, looked out the window and smirked at his own situation. The irony was certainly not lost upon the spiky-haired ninja. "Up until just a few short months ago I thought that no one would love me for myself, and now I think I have more love than I can handle." Although tensions were far from settled, the ordeal was over for now. Hinata was sworn to secrecy, and all was well with the world, or at least Naruto thought as much as he and Tsunade returned home. Naruto noticed that she looked unusually pensive. Guessing what the problem was, he took her hands in his. Naruto whispered in her ear, "This changes nothing, Tsunade. I still love you with all my heart, now and forever. I'm just comforting a friend who needs me, that's all." Tsunade sighed bitterly. Even though she had agreed to it, she really couldn't help but feel a little jealous. The fact was that even with the crystal embedded in her forehead keeping her body physically young as long as it kept releasing charka into her system, she was in reality old, far older. Han Naruto, unlike Hinata, who seemed almost the perfect counterpart to Naruto, both in age and temperament. Everything is changed. She needs you far more than a normal friend does. I think you realize that. Yeah, maybe so, but, Naruto faltered, trying to come up with an argument. Failing, his eyes cast down to the ground, until inspiration flashed in his eyes. "I think I have something to cheer you up, how about a back rub?" Tsunade still grumbled a bit, but admitted that after such a stressful day, it sounded really good. After Tsunade sat down in their sofa, Naruto moved in behind Tsunade, and he gently began to rub her shoulders. Closing her eyes and enjoying the sensations, she didn't notice as Naruto removed his priceless necklace and placed it gently across Tsunade's neck. "Tsunade, open your eyes." "Naruto, why did you stop?" Quote, "Take a look. This is the same necklace I lost to you years ago, why are you giving it back to me?" "I figure since I can't really afford a diamond, I could give you a piece of jewelry. After all, it's traditional, right? What's traditional? Tsunade replied, mystified. To give something expensive during a marriage proposal. Tsunade's breath caught in her throat. Naruto. What are you saying? Quote. Naruto walked in front of her and took her hands in his. Kneeling down, his clear sky blue eyes looking directly into her soul, and Naruto said, well, Tsunade-chan. How about it? Once I become Hokage, will you marry me? Quote. Tears welled up in the brown eyes of the Godime. This was his own over-the-top way of saying that she was still most important to him, and her hands clasped him in a tight embrace, never wanting to let go. Yes, yes I will. I would like nothing better than to be Uzumaki Tsunade. Naruto gasped under the unrestrained hug. That's great, could you maybe let go now? I can't breathe. And so, 2 weeks later, marked fittingly by the thaw of winter and the awkward beginning of spring, Hinata's work as a.m. Ethical ninja under Tsunade began, effectively filling Sakura's formal role, alongside her continuing training and missions with Anko. Naruto would also soon find his life far more complicated than before, as he endeavored to give his fiancée and his dearest friend both the attention they needed, but inside the bedroom and out, without making the other jealous. Far easier said than done, Naruto had to admit to himself. At her apartment across town, Anko Mitarashi fumed. Hinata and Naruto were both acting flaky in their training and missions, almost leading to the failure of an important B-Ra NKED mission, and she was going to get to the bottom of it. No way was she going to allow her team, with the prestige of being the elite squad, to become sloppy. She was determined to prove herself just as reliable and capable a Junin as Kurenai or Asuma or any of the others, and not just some unstable reject of Orochimaru's. Even thinking that name left a bitter taste in her mouth. Her whole career as a ninja had been tainted by his crimes and his defection. But in Naruto and Hinata she had a chance to prove that she had what it took to be a trusted Junin. And if that meant digging a little into her students' lives to get them to work out whatever their issues they were having, so be it. Spring had finally come to the village hidden in the leaves. As the snow melted away, the village began bustling with a renewed vitality. Looking across the village, there were many positive signs. Repairs were now complete. It was almost impossible to tell that there had been an invasion just 2 years ago. Two Chunin, Kotetsu Hagane and Izumo Kamizuki, walked through the village towards the training grounds, where their new assignment ents waited. Cutting through the marketplace, the hustle and bustle of the largest hidden village in the 5 ninja nations could be heard. Kotetsu and Izumo were usually assigned whatever random task was needed at the moment. Right now they were given the important mission to train the next generation. Although noisy, if a skilled shinobi kept his ears open, he could hear some very interesting tidbits of gossip could be heard throughout the marketplace. Like 3 village elders sitting down to tea. Have you noticed? The Godime has completely stopped drinking. I guess that beast is good for something after all. Well, with that as her successor, the Godime can't really afford to let her guard down at all. Quote, oh, you two are horrible. The Uzumaki child has become a part of an elite 2-man team. And since the other member is the heir to the Hyuga main branch, it means that the fox child is at least as strong as a Hyuga. That is impressive, I suppose. More like scary. Oh, shut up. If the Godime thinks the beast can be used positively, we should trust her. And besides, would you rather have that thing attacking us again, or in a role where it would have to protect us? Quote, True. Further on, they walked past some gossiping Hyuga branch members, both young girls. Hey, did you hear? Hinata-sama cut her hair short again. What? Why? She was looking so much more mature with her longer hair. Quote, I know, I even told her it made her look a little like the Hokage, and she actually got angry at me. It was kinda scary, 'cause normally she's as shy as a mouse. I guess she doesn't like being compared to the Hokage. Which is weird because I hear she being tutored of medical jutsu by her. Medical jutsu? Isn't that stuff hard? Yeah, But she's pretty good at it. Amazing. Taking a left turn into another thoroughfare, two merchants could be seen chatting by their booths. The Godime has ordered the refurbishing of the temple that was destroyed 14 years ago. You know the one dedicated to Inari. Yeah, wasn't it left derelict, its statues destroyed? It was a small shrine, with no resident priest to fix it up. Quote, yeah, after the catastrophe and not many people were willing to help rebuild something that had to do with Fox Kami, but a month ago Hokage-sama insisted that it be refurbished and restored. I wonder why she would do something like that. Quote, well, it is a kami of commerce and fertile harvests, so maybe she doing it to help with the trade. That must be it. The economy is still in a slump. How clever. Leave it to a woman Hokage to think of these things. Quote, a few blocks closer to the training grounds, there was a Korean barbecue restaurant, where Team 10 usually hung out between their now numerous missions. At one of the outside tables, once again Sarutobi Asuma was attempting to bribe Choji Akamichi and Shikamaru Nara into taking their training seriously. Team 10's morale wasn't exactly at an all-time high, since after the dissolving of both Team 7 and 8, they were receiving almost a third of the rank C missions in the village, tedious transport and bodyguard missions that didn't pay particularly well, but was just dangerous enough to be, as Shikamaru eloquently put it, troublesome. Finally arriving at the training ground, their new students Kiba Inuzuka and Shino Aburame were waiting for them. Since Kurenai's team dissolved, both were often left out of missions, which were necessary for personal growth as shinobi. So by order of the Hokage, it has come down to them, since Junins in any capacity, teacher or otherwise, were still at a premium. Alright, you two. I am Katetsu and this is my partner Izumo. Now that your team is dissolved, the Hokage has assigned us to be your mentors. Now I understand the both of you are upset at the sudden breaking up of your group, but upon review of Kurenai's teaching record, both with your team and a previous student, Yakumo Kurama, and Hinata Hyuga's complaints, it was decided that it was in the general interest of Team 8 to break up. Teams are traditionally in groups of 3, because with less there is increased vulnerability to ambush and with more there is loss of stealth. But as a two-man team, there are still many opportunities as a shinobi. I am here to open your eyes to the wonderful opportunities of city missions. Not every shinobi in Konoha travels the continent, risking their lives, mind you. Kiba immediately interjected. What? You mean like those crappy D-ranked missions we had to do when we were fresh out of the academy? Exclamation mark quote. No, of course not. This is important courier missions for the village. You mean we'll be gophers? Shino said flatly. You'll be entrusted with helping Konoha and its various village systems run in tip-top shape. Quote. So, gophers. Shino repeated again. It's serious work, Izuno chimed in. At times you will even be asked to carry high-level documents from one location in Konohaka to another, rank A level work, with rank A level pay. Quote. As the two Chunin continued their speech, Kiba muttered under his breath to Shino, I still can't believe we are being trained as, what did you call it? Gophers, essentially miscellaneous errand boys. Shinto responded quietly. It's insulting, especially considering our skills already surpasses these guys, substantially. And meanwhile, Naruto has been taught by Jiraiya and now Tsunade. And I hear he is even part of an elite team. What's that mean? Supposedly, Hinata and Naruto's skills are being fostered at such an astounding rate as to no longer need a third member of their team. Is that so? Kiba cleared his throat to get the attention of the rambling Katetsu. So, since me and Shino are going to be working as a two-man pair, does this make us an elite team, too? Kiba asked, his voice hopeful. Every bit as elite as I and Izumo here. Katetsu said proudly, completely oblivious to the fact that the statement he just made was the opposite of what Kiba wanted to hear. Kiba sighed dejectedly. Yes, it was good, reliable work, with promising pay, but hardly a fast track to fame. Kiba looked up at the sky and asked silently, what does Naruto have that I don't have? Quote. Naruto slowly opened his eyes, sunlight creeping in through the window. For a briefest of moments confused as to why he had woken up so early, he sharply took in a breath as he became aware of the reason. Looking down at his lap, a familiar head of ponytailed platinum blonde hair bobbed up and down rapidly, as the Godime Hokage eagerly worked her skills upon her new fiancé. Naruto gazed lovingly at Tsunade, enjoying her ministrations. He personally preferred how she looked in the mornings, before she went to all the superfluous effort of putting on makeup. To him she was perfect just the way she was. Her lips, a beautiful pale shade of pink, being streaked almost comically around his member as she plied her technique, and her EY's, that intense color of chocolate brown, as she stared directly at him as she pleasured him, making him feel like a god. Naruto gave a sharp intake of breath as she began deep-throating him. Naruto had to admit that there was a certain sense of power, having the inspiration for kunoichi everywhere. The most powerful woman in all the ninja countries, and thus quite possibly the world, submitting herself to him like this, and furthermore enjoying it. Naruto grunted slighted as he came, Tsunade eagerly swallowing every drop. Licking her lips, Tsunade got up and slipped back under the sheets next to her husband-to-be. Good morning, Naruto-kun. Morning, Tsunade-chan. That was quite the wake-up call. Don't you ever quit, we were at it just, like, 5 hours ago. Quote. Well, yeah, but Hinata got the lion's share of you that time and, well. Said Hyuga was on the opposite side of Naruto, still fast asleep. Another of her study sessions at Tsunade's office had inevitably led to her having once again enjoying an evening with Naruto. You just couldn't wait till this evening, huh? Naruto inquired. Well, let's just say that it's important for a shinobi to start the day with a high-protein breakfast. Naruto merely rolled his eyes at this. What time is it anyway? 5 o'clock, Anko wanted you at the training grounds in an hour and a half, right? Crap, that's right, she'll have out hides if we're late. Hey, Hinata-chan, time to get up. Naruto turned over and lightly shaking the white-eyed girl awake. Just give me a minute, I'm still sore. Hinata complained sleepily as she struggled to get out of bed. I don't know how you do it, Tsunade. I barely managed to fit that huge thing in. Yet you can do it without any problem. Well, Naruto and I have had lots and lots of practice. Tsunade said smugly. Hinata's eyes narrowed slightly. Anyway, I know you guys showered after last night's festivities, but I gotta go take a quick shower, I'm still sticky. As her form slipped off to the bathroom, she turned and said, Oh, and Naruto, about last night, you were magnificent. Tsunade almost audibly growled as the bathroom door shut. The last 3 weeks had seen a large metamorphosis in Hinata, who was still shy and mousy in all things but matters concerning Naruto. Naruto and Tsunade began getting dressed. After a moment of silence, the sound of the water started, and Naruto spoke suddenly, the normal energy in his voice subdued. You know, Tsunade-chan, I know that me being with Hinata is uncomfortable for you. If you're not okay sharing the same bed with her, just tell me. I'll explain to her that it isn't working out. Even if she exposes us, I think I would prefer that to cheating on you. Tsunade sighed, then promptly cuffed Naruto upside the head, who only remained unconcussed by the Sannin due to his recent training. Don't be ridiculous, you aren't cheating on me. I'm right here, aren't I? Besides, I can tell that it stopped being pity between you and her for a while now. You do care for her, on some level. Quote. OWW, yeah, well, but I care about you, too. I want you to be my wife, you know, in case senility finally caught up to you. Tsunade huffed at this. Very funny, Gaki, like I'd forget. Anyway, Hinata is the one who instigated this situation, not you. Besides, it's kind of nice having a competent secretary again. Tsunade joked lightly, trying to raise Naruto's spirits, but his eyes stayed downcast and he was frowning slightly. It's just, I mean, it's not fair for you, you know. If I were in your shoes, and I thought you were with someone else, I'd hunt him down and rip his heart out, seriously. Naruto deadpanned, not a quiver in his voice to suggest a joke. But nevertheless Tsunade bit back a laugh at the ridiculous image of Naruto in a suit of shining samurai armor, Jalo. USLY defending her honor. Don't worry your pretty little head, Naru-kun, I'm all yours, and I know that the largest part of you belongs to me. And which largest part is that? Naruto asked. Your heart, Baka. Tsunade answered. Though your comes in a close second. She mentally added. By now they were both completely dressed. Lightly rapping on the bathroom door, as not to break it, the Hokage called out. Hurry up in there, I need to put my face on. I still don't get why you insist upon wearing lipstick and nail polish every day. Naruto commented. You spend most of each day hidden behind a wall of papers, anyway. Quote. That may be, Naruto, but a woman needs to look her best, especially when she's the boss. Hinata Hinali stepped out, a towel wrapped around her slender, but slightly busty frame. Alright, I'm out. Looking at her training partner, who was already dressed and ready to go, she said. You go on ahead, Naruto, I'll catch up. Thanks a lot, leave me to deal with Mitarashi on my own. Oh well, I'll see you at training, Hinata-chan. Giving both Tsunade and Hinata a quick peck on the cheek, V dashed out the door, his usual energy restored by the beautiful spring morning. After an awkward pause, Hinata smirked and said, You know, Hyugas are renowned for their sight, but we tend to have pretty good hearing too. It was nice of you to reassure Naruto like that. I did it for his sake more than yours, Hinata. He tends to beat himself up whenever he thinks he's failed or wronged someone. Tsunade said, a hint of sadness in her voice. I know, that sense of empathy of his is one of his greatest qualities, and one of the reasons I came to care for him in the first place. Now fully dressed, Hinata went to the kitchen and grabbed 2 apples out of the refrigerator. Ah, speaking of Naruto, he forgot breakfast again. Can I grab you anything before I head out? No thanks, I already ate. Tsunade quipped, suppressing a smirk. Hinata raised an eyebrow at this, then shrugging, headed out after Naruto. Unlike Kakashi, Anko was always early to any drawing sessions or missions. It was odd, almost as if she had nothing better to do. By the time she would reach the training grounds, the odds were Anko would most likely have him doing some insane training drill, despite being early. Evening. With a great deal of effort, and more than a bit of desperation, Naruto Uzumaki had once again survived the increasingly ridiculous training of Anko Mitarashi, which had consisted of taxing physical drills and working out complex combat scenarios, all of which was followed in the evening by the strenuous tutoring and paperwork under Tsunade, who still demanded excellence in her students, and had finally endured a full evening of erotic antics including being joined by the nubile Hyuga heiress, back at Tsunade's house. Naruto was out like a light, sandwiched between 2 equally tired women. 5 rounds with Tsunade and 3 rounds with Hinata, his stamina, mighty as it was spent. Hinata looked over at Tsunade, who lay on the opposite side of Naruto, both exhausted from who knows how many orgasms. As always, he finishes up with you. What a surprise. Hinata muttered. I swear, how many hundreds of times have you 2 done it, and he still prefers you in the sack, what's your secret? Tsunade shifted slightly as she gave Hinata's question some thought. I don't know, I just enjoy being close to him. I feel most complete when he's inside me. Maybe he feels the same. How wonderful for you too. Hinata sighed out sarcastically. Tsunade stared at the ceiling as she spoke. It isn't as perfect as you may think. A healthy relationship does not stand solely on. I mean, we're in a taboo relationship with a 40-year generation gap, and all of a sudden he wants to marry me, and I honestly don't know if I can be a good wife. If I'm really going to try my hand at marriage, I need your help to relate to Naruto. He needs to see me as more than a lover or boss, but as a friend. I want to share in Naruto's interests. But the music he listens to is just horrible noise, and whenever he shows me one of his electronic games, I always end up dying, and I can't even make miso ramen the way he likes it. What kind of wife can't cook? Now, I know you see me as some horrible rival standing between you and Naruto. The fact is, Hinata, that we need your help, if we are to make this work. Just consider it, would you? With that, Tsunade turned over, and draping an arm over Naruto as she closed her eyes and eventually nodded off. Watching the sleeping couple, Hinata smiled to herself. There was finally something that invincible Tsunade needed help with. It made sense, after all, since she was 53 years old, that she would have trouble relating to a teenager on some things. You both need me, huh? Alright, why not? She thought to herself as she made herself comfortable. It felt nice to be needed, the white-eyed girl reflected, as she snuggled up against Naruto's dosing form. She barely missed a small ruffling of leaves outside the window, as she closed her eyes and drifted off. Anko was incensed. She had finally decided to follow after her students to try to figure out why they were always so distracted during practice. And lo and behold, here was the reason. They already knew they were studying under Tsunade in the evenings, which was no small cause of jealousy on Anko's part, but the real shock came when all three of them traveled to the Hokage's apartment. How long had she been blind to this while it went on behind her back? She had no idea how long the affair between Tsunade and Naruto had been going, but it must have been a while, and now it included the young Uga heiress. All the work that she had put into teaching the both of them, the emotional investment, and trying her best to be a respected and admired teacher, and Tsunade had swiped them both away. Did they really even need her? Once again, Anko was alone and she hated it. The pride she felt when Hinata mastered an attack jutsu, the sense of accomplishment when Naruto calmly and correctly assessed a combat situation. Those were no longer hers. Not to mention the rush of heat that went through her whenever she and Naruto flirted. All gone. She was alone. Again. Visions of snake's eyes and cruel laughs echoed through her mind as she grappled with the memory of past abandonment. She wouldn't let it go back to the way it was before, she just couldn't survive being alone and angry at the world again. Anko's sour grimace slowly lifted up into a sadistic smile. She wouldn't have to be alone. She now knew of the affair and she held the futures of all three shinobi in her hand. In exchange for not exposing Naruto's precious Hokage and the heir to the Hyugas to scandal, she could blackmail him into doing anything she wanted. Anything.